It had been a year since my mother passed away. My ex-boyfriend of many years decided he didn't want to deal with my mother's illness anymore. He conveniently stopped all communication with me and found someone else. He cut me loose with no closure. It seems I was alone. No one had my back. No one was there to support me. I didn't know how I was going to move on with my life. My mother was my best friend, and fucking cancer took her from me. After over a year had gone by, I decided to search the internet for places I can discuss what I was going through with someone, anyone. Writing was my release, and when shit hit the fan, I always found comfort in typing the blues away. I decided to go on Craigslist as one of the options. I know, it's shady, but there's a section where you can just post things specifically. However, I soon realized that there is always someone posting inappropriately, even if it's unwanted or in the wrong section. Don't ask me how, but someone aged 40 replied to my post and then just kept writing and writing to me until the wee hours of the morning. This went on for 6 months. He told me his experiences, things we had in common, and life. In those 6 months, he asked me several times to meet him for coffee nearby. I gently always turned him down. I had no interest in actually meeting with someone, none whatsoever. One night, our conversation took a turn. He just wanted to see pictures of me. He sent some of himself, clean cut, office kind of guy, and not my type at all, but they were friendly pictures. I did the same. I didn't want to, but I felt I had to send something. His reaction was over the top. He showered me with endless compliments, and now was insisting on seeing me no matter what. I thought it would be harmless. After all, what could go wrong meeting at a local Tim Hortons for coffee full of people? So I dressed myself, forced myself to look a little better than usual, but I didn't go all out. I wasn't thrilled about this meetup. I had never done this in my life. My previous boyfriend was from school, and I stuck with him all these years. I never did the blind dating or online relationships before. I've heard some horror stories. But overall, I was just not prepared, and I was so let down by men that I just thought this would go nowhere. I finally met Paul. He was like in his pictures, except he was full of scars on his face. Strange scars he quickly justified as having issues with acne when he was younger. I had issues, and these did not look anything like acne scarring. It was as though he had been beaten and healed badly. I didn't concern myself with this. I listened to him for 6 hours at the coffee shop. It was open all night. I was glad not to be doing so much talking. However, some instances came off a little fake and as if he was acting. I brushed this off. He began to tear up when he spoke about his grandparents passing away. The acting became worse. I felt bad thinking that it wasn't real. I refrained from comforting him. I usually would, but something made me not do it. We parted ways, and he was giddy and wanted to see me again. I went home and thought about it and said to myself, he's not your type. He lied about being 40. He said he was 48 and hoped I didn't mind. That should have already been red flag number 1. As we continued to see each other once a week, it was getting closer to the holidays, and I love Christmas, even though it's a sad time for me. I briefly thought maybe this Christmas I wouldn't be alone if Paul is in the picture, and so, already by date number 3, he had begged me. The way he manipulated me was unreal. Why was I giving this guy a chance? I don't know. I felt that at his age, and knowing about what happened with my mother, He was sincere and mature, but I didn't see a future with him. One night, he had me on the couch after dinner and said to me, "Would you see yourself marrying me?" I didn't want to offend him and said yes. However, all I could think of was, what the fuck are you talking about? This is just date number 3. He began seducing me soon after he said that, and I was toast. I recall thinking that although that was red flag number 2, this new adventure was exciting, and I easily forgot what had just happened prior to the sex. He was odd at times though. I felt like he would talk down to me. I was fully educated and had several degrees. He had none. Maybe this was his way to feel like the man. I really don't know. He mentions of his past relationships, and they seem to be awful every time. He said women abused him, and verbally as well. It made me aware of how I spoke around him. Not that I'm abusive or controlling. I'm quite passive actually. However, he made me extra aware around him, as though I had to walk on eggshells. That was another red flag. The more time passed, the more he grew on me. We emailed dozen times a day and night between every single day. He was attentive and always asked how I was doing. He asked me to be his girlfriend by date number 4, and I said yes. What else was I going to say? It felt weird that he had to ask me, but also, I felt it might be something suggested later on. This was not the kind of experience I had in the past. Maybe older men were just this way. They wanted to commit. His conversations eventually began to change. He wanted me to do more crazy things in bed with him. He asked me if I minded bringing some shower curtains, baby oil, and whatever other toys I had. So I went out and bought everything I could think of, and gathered an actual carry-on and filled it with all of these things. I got ready as per usual on the Friday night and headed over to his place. By the way, he kept his apartment pristine. Everything was neat, modern, and organized. I thought those were the good traits. He had a room for his daughter for when she visited every other weekend, a room where he kept his geeky collectibles. His bedroom was in good taste, and overall, it was immaculate really. He lived a little secluded in front of a big park, in a duplex owned by an older Italian couple. I had not met them, but since it was Christmas time, they had brought Paul a huge amount of leftovers, all made from scratch, during one of the nights I was over. I thought how typical it was for us Italians to be generous this way. I'm Italian-Canadian, by the way, so Paul was lucky. He had good landlords. That night, he surprised me with dinner. He did some things in the kitchen I disapproved of, but I did not bring them up. Having cooked for so many years and working in restaurants, I know the protocol for cooking chicken, and he did not seem to follow basic rules when it came to handling chicken. He also mentioned reheating entire meals out of sheer laziness, rather than just taking one portion and heating that alone. I did mention to him that you cannot reheat the same dish over and over again, especially with red sauce and meat involved. He didn't care and sort of snapped at me about it, but he would still do it, and that was fine. That was another red flag. At this point, I lost count. He also brought up being divorced, and the reason he ended it despite a baby involved. He said she was too much of a morning person, and he was not, and that her taste in music was not his. I did mention those were not reasons to get a divorce, and he changed facial expressions and the subject quickly. He had me puzzled when I least expected it, but he always found a way to distract me from what had just occurred. That evening, we were supposed to venture into what was for me the unknown of all that he asked for me to bring. I opened my carry-on and showed him everything I brought, including the stilettos. He didn't seem impressed. He began acting strange. I began to feel strange too. I felt lightheaded. I thought a migraine was coming on, so I excused myself to take a pill and drink water. That's when I began to wobble and soon collapsed. I eventually came to and felt that I had no clothes on. I could feel the pain of me having fallen hard. I could not speak or move much. What was going on? I soon realized it could not be my medication. It was something else. I had been drugged. I could see Paul hovering over me, feel the wood beneath my naked legs, and he was dragging me. His face was serious, and his eyes were pitch dark and inhuman. What the fuck was going on, and what was going to happen to me? I felt myself being dragged into his collector room. Wait a minute, this was a different room, not the same. Where was all his Star Trek action figures? He plopped me on the couch, and I heard ripping noises. That was duct tape. Panic instilled inside of me, and I could not move. My eyes were in part covered with my long hair, and I could just hear everything he was doing except make out his words. They sounded like they do in TV shows when people are drunk or stoned, and they have heavily distorted voices. I felt my ankles being taped up, and then my wrists. I wondered how long I would be dosed for. I tried moving my legs to kick him, but nothing worked. I managed to keep my eyes open, and I was aware. What was it that he gave me? Was it in the food? My water? He just taped my mouth and grinned down at me while wiping the hair away from my eyes. What kind of fucker asshole was this? He left the mystery room, shut the lights, and closed the door. I was now naked, unable to move, and I didn't know what was going to happen to me or who the hell this guy was anymore. Thankfully, I could think pretty clearly, just my body wasn't working. I tried hard for what seemed at least 30 minutes to move. There was no movement. And when he returned, he was holding the clear plastic shower curtain in one hand and a toolbox in the other. I really began to panic now, and moans were actually coming out of my throat. He must have seen the panic, and it seemed to feed him. This was not some innocent random hurting man on Craigslist seeking a friendly shoulder. This was a fucking psycho killer, or God knows what the fuck else. I started forcing with all of my might to get my legs to move. I felt piss coming out of me, and the heat of it. I felt the warmth of it, wet and pooling beneath me, then getting absorbed into the couch cushion beneath me. That had to be good, right? I remember reading somewhere where hostage cases defecated themselves and made themselves dirty so their kidnappers would be repulsed and leave them alone. This calmed me down, and I tried really hard, to defecate myself. Yeah, I tried shitting myself even if I could not feel a thing down there. He approached me with the plastic shower curtain. As he was unfolding it, sniffed towards me and started swearing like hell. He was pissed and was throwing down the curtain to come take a look at me. He said, and now I heard him clearly, "You fucking cunt! You pissed yourself? And my couch? You fucking bitch!" And I saw his hand raising and coming down on me, but the blow was numbed out. He had blood on his hand, so I realized he broke something or sliced me open somehow. Thankfully, the pain was not kicking in yet. When you're in a situation like this, which counts as life and death, you just block irrelevant pain out. I tried harder to see if I could shit myself literally. At this point, that was going to be my way out, if anything. I needed to feel my arms and legs. I needed that shit to come out of me, the drugs or whatever the hell inside of my bowels. Just to repulse this fucker and to get the drugs out of me. I really didn't care about his couch. Fuck him. I also had to find a way to make noise and alert his landlords just below me. They were Italian, and this asshole was not. I could communicate with them in Italian somehow and keep this bastard in the dark a little fraction of a second. You know, to buy me some time at some point in my escape. Because after all the shit I had gone through, this fucker was not going to be the end of me. I was not going to go down via some creepy fuck off of Craigslist. He rushed out of the room. I heard a rummaging, and he was talking to himself. He left the door open. I felt tingling in my toes and knew I was beginning to feel some parts of me and that the drugs were wearing off. He could not know this. I had to shit myself. I focused with all of my might, and I felt uncomfortably squishiness in my rear end. This was fucking disgusting. This humiliation better save my ass. Literally. He came storming back in with paper towels and all sorts of cleaning products, and then he dropped it all on the floor and rushed back overhead me and beat me hard. He called me every name in the book and knew I had shit myself. He stormed out again. This time, I felt everything. I just laid there, in agony. I felt my nose was broken. My ribs must have been broken. I felt a searing pain, so something was clearly open flesh and bleeding down my midsection. Suddenly, I heard the front door slamming and his footsteps rushing downstairs. I also heard the start of an engine, and I immediately threw myself off the couch and rolled on the floor with a thud. I was facing the floorboards and put my ear down to listen if anyone was downstairs. I heard what sounded like a TV and some faint chatter. I tried moving, but could not flip myself upward to my side. I had to do something, so I slammed my toes downward on the floor hard. I did this over and over again. I heard the TV go silent downstairs, so I continued slamming my feet down and knew my toes were broken by now. I just kept doing this. I found the will to shift my weight and turn to my side facing the door. I slithered myself to the door and kept banging my heels downward hard. I felt my body making streaking noises, which were a combination of sweat, feces, piss, and blood. I really could not care less. I needed someone to come find me, even if it meant in this state. I heard the door downstairs being jiggled with a key. The stairway before entering his apartment echoed. I heard a male voice in broken English call out, "Hello?" I was trying to shout through the fucking duct tape and banging my heels and whatever body part I could, including my head. Again. "Hello?" I banged more. I heard the door close, and it was quiet again. I was now crying. My only fucking hope just left and didn't even come and check upstairs. I continued banging downstairs. I didn't care. That's when I heard the door opening again. This time the steps were hurried upstairs. This man was young. He said, "Fuck me," and he rushed over to me and whipped his cell phone out. He banged hard downstairs and dialed 911. What a sight I must have been. But as he crouched down to me, about to take the tape out of my mouth, that's when Paul, the fucker, was standing right behind him and hit him on the head with a crowbar. I was crying and left staring into the eyes of my rescue angel, bleeding on the floor next to me. The only thought I had in my head was, it's over. I'm dead. Fucking Craigslist. That's when I blacked out, screaming the loudest I ever could through the duct tape. I woke up hearing beeping sounds. electronic ones that were steady on repeat. The room was so bright, it was really hard to open my eyes. Someone was standing over me, and that's when I heard, "She's awake," and shuffling of footsteps. A female voice asked me my name, what day it was, where I lived. I answered in a robotic monotone voice I did not recognize as my own. I barely got anything out. Why was speaking so hard? Suddenly, everything became clear. I saw a doctor and several nurses surrounding the end of what was a hospital bed. Nothing looked familiar to me. I knew the hospitals well, and I could not place where I was. That's when I heard a voice saying loud and slowly, "You are all cleared of danger. You are safe. You're at the hospital. It's been 2 days since you were admitted." I nodded to show them I understood. I felt I could not speak much yet. My throat was dry. I felt pain everywhere. A police officer approached me. He gave me his badge number and said some technical information that escaped me as soon as he said it. I jerked my head up at the mention of Paul. His real name wasn't Paul. He was a known sociopath called Gary Winston with a previous string of assaults and jail time, ID theft, impersonation, and so many other online crimes. He was a known predator. He was known to have kidnapped and almost murdered many women over the years. I was his type, and it seemed he never succeeded at killing them. There was always something missing, or not enough evidence, and he would always get off. No one could ever put him away for good. He was sloppy. The officer proceeded to tell me everything I did, which was incredible. He said that my strategy of defense could save future victims, and I was very lucky that Joe, the landlord's son, found me when he did. His last stunning attempts downstairs alerted his father to also call the police. They arrived shortly after Gary knocked Joe out. He protested his arrest and said Joe had attacked us both and Joe was responsible. Fortunately, both of Joe's parents alerted the police that it was the other way around. I guess I will never know why this happened. I also question why me. After all I went through, I also had to have gone through a kidnapping, assault, and almost getting killed. This experience almost made me appreciate my cheating coward of an ex-boyfriend. I asked the police officer what happened to Joe, and I heard another voice. The angel came forward, and I laid there staring at awe. You came to save me. I thought he killed you. I thought you were dead." "No, he knocked me out. I have a few stitches, that's all. I'm good." Joe offered me a wide and warm smile, the shred of hope I needed to realize that we both actually made it through this nightmare, and we were alive. Broken, but alive. The officer continued and said that Paul, or Gary, that was his real name, had been arrested. I could file for a restraining order. I was safe now. Joe reached out and grabbed my hand. I began sobbing and smiling nervously at him. He knew I was grateful. All I know for sure is that Gary, or Paul, whoever the fuck you are, you better not show yourself to me ever again. I will tear you apart and make you shit yourself over and over if you try. May God help you, and God help you if you ever try this with anyone else ever again. Hey Gary, you imposter from hell, I hope we never meet again.